everyone. Good morning and welcome to Voices being brought to you by Radio Zindagi. I'm Ms. Renu, the founder of Genius Kids. This is my favorite time of the week and today's show is actually very close to my heart. So thank you all for tuning in. As you all know, October is the Domestic Violence Awareness Month, but as far as Radio Zindagi and myself are concerned, this awareness needs to be addressed every single day. Today's show is very critical as we invite experts on the panelists to address many very critical and important questions to shed light on this invisible, what I call an invisible pandemic of domestic violence. We all know about the coronavirus, but trust me, domestic violence has been going on for years. And we raise our voices, not that we can shout, but so that the voices of those who cannot be heard will be heard on today's show. So without further ado, I'll be giving you statistics during the show, but without further ado, I'd like to welcome our panelists for today. And one of the main reasons why we brought these panelists today is because a few weeks ago, we had a young lady on our show called Jasmeet Kaur, who was brought to us by Rini Johar, a friend of mine who's on the panelist today as well. And she shared her story, a very distressing and sad story about her experience of domestic violence and how she was stranded and what she's still going through even now today, though she's here in the United States, which is meant to be this progressive country. So we've brought together with us an expert of panelists who are going to share and answer many of our questions. So in no particular order, just as I see them on my screen on Zoom, I'd like to begin the introductions. We have with us, first, of course, my dear friend, Rini Johar, who's very actively involved with, of course, her own clinic, but she's the founder of Disha Darshan, which is a one-stop resource center for domestic violence victims. She's a licensed JD and a foreign legal consultant and expert on Hindu laws. So welcome to the show, Rini. And then we have with us Ash Kalra, assemblyman since 2016. He worked as a public defender for 11 years before assuming office and having been awarded the 2019 Legislature of the Year Award from Next Door Solutions for Domestic Violence. Welcome, Ash.
Thank you.
Then we have with us Sumiti Rao. She's the Consul for Community Affairs, Information, Culture, and Visa at the Consulate General. She represents the Indian Consulate in San Francisco and has a lot of experience handling domestic violence issues and women in distress. Welcome, Sumiti. Then we have with us Captain John Harnett. John Harnett has been with the Fremont Police Department right here, right behind my office for 21 years and is currently the Special Operations Commander, which encompasses the investigative unit, the tactical team, and community engagement. Welcome, John.
Thank you.
Then we have with us Nancy O'Malley. She's the District Attorney of Alameda County since 2009. Nancy is nationally recognized expert in issues involving violence against women. So welcome to the show, Nancy.
Thank you so much.
We also have with us Jenna Oxford. She's the SAVE Crisis Response Manager, has been with SAVE for 6 years. So welcome, Jenna.
Thank you.
And I believe I've got everyone, and we'll be joined at 12:30 by Assemblyman Kansen, and I will introduce him at that time. So thank you, everyone. I know today is a very important show, and I'm known for my humor, but I promise you today I will not bring any of my jokes into this show because this show is too close to my heart to start joking about it. So my first question, I'd like to begin with Nancy. So Nancy, please tell us your expertise in domestic violence and what has your office done for victims of domestic violence? And maybe you could also tell us in that question, the development and empowerment programs you have in place.
So I actually began as a volunteer working in a domestic violence shelter back in the 70s. And at that time, I was volunteering to serve rape crisis victims and domestic violence victims. And I have to say that the system was so built against the victims that victims were blamed for the abuse, that the remedy was to walk the abuser around the block to cool down. And so thankfully, through the Violence Against Women Act that came about 20 plus years ago, and a lot of law changes in California, that's really been brought us to a place where we understand the dynamics of domestic violence. So my experience both as a victim advocate and as a prosecutor handling these cases, and then as the district attorney, is very extensive in this field. Some of the things that my office has done, we have, of course, a specialized unit of trained prosecutors and victim advocates who work with survivors that are going through the criminal justice system. We also have a family justice center. One of our partners is SAVE, where Jenna works, and all of our shelter partners are partners in our justice center. And what it is it co-located a lot of agencies so that victims would not have to go to 20 different places to get services, rather go to one place and receive 20 services. And through the Family Justice Center, we now see about 15,000 people a year, including 2,000 children. And I never want to forget that children are impacted by domestic violence, even if they aren't the ones physically attacked. And so we have at our Family Justice Center, we're also a trauma recovery center. So we have therapists that are there to help people address their trauma. We have women's empowerment. We have men that come. We serve about 1,000 men a year. And we really try to be as holistic as we can. And I will say that for many people, prosecution is not where they want to go, but we want people to be safe, and we want them to be safe in their relationship. And if they choose to stay in that relationship, we want to make sure that the person who's doing the abuse has is getting treatment or is engaged in some programs so that they can address their own issues about why they are taking out their anger or their violence against their loved one. And we also have a lot of programs for the women that we work with. Like I said, about 15,000 a year. We have a branch office down in Fremont who works very closely with the Fremont Police Department. I have to say, the work the Fremont Police Department has done in domestic violence has always stood out of all of the police agencies that I've worked with, because they don't just address at the immediacy, they go back and make sure that people are safe a week later or 10 days later. They stay in touch and make sure that they're linked into services, great services like RICO or SAVE. And then through grant money, we're able to provide grant funds to our partners, to our shelter partners, including SAVE, which we're very proud to do. So we're very, very active. Violence against women, crimes that involve violence against women or children has always been a high priority for me and for my office.
Thank you so much for that. Thank you for your detailed response. I learned so much, even I didn't even know that this is that there was so extensive. So thank you. Ash, Assemblyman Ash, welcome again to the show. Please let us know if the California Assembly or Legislature has passed any bills for the benefit of domestic violence victims, which seems to have quadrupled in the corona epidemic. And would you be authoring some of these bills in the future?
So, there actually has been legislation for more victim support. And the other thing that has been has passed through the legislature over the last couple of years, not specific to the pandemic, although you're 100% correct that with the stay-at-home orders, there's definitely an exacerbation of some of the issues. And so that is something that has been undertaken by our Women's Caucus. So we do have like different caucuses as part of our legislature. And so our Women's Caucus has taken it under their wing to kind of do a further deep dive as to how to respond back. I will say also that what we're trying to do, and this is something I learned a long time. You mentioned my work as a public defender. So I'm my 12th year in elected office. Before that, when I was a public defender, I worked very closely with the judge that was in charge of the domestic violence courts. And we started putting a lot more emphasis on the men that were perpetrating, and what I mean is actually to the district attorney's point, like you can prosecute someone, put them in jail and they get released. If you don't do something to either get them in counseling or do something to change their behavior, they will find another victim. You can pull the victim out of that situation and and protect the survivor. But if you don't do something to address the underlying causes of that anger, then there will be more victims. And that goes to the other issue where we're trying to work on the legislature is also victim support, not just for the survivor, but for the children, is because the children absorb that. And if it's a male perpetrator, if it's a father that is abusing the mother and you have a son, that son is far greater likelihood of being a perpetrator later in life. Or if it's a daughter, far more likely to be a victim later in life. And so we're trying to be more thoughtful about how we approach the criminal justice system in order to get the proper resources, probation, for example, so that they can actually get people, have resources to get people into not just anger management, but deeper psychiatric help, deeper deeper help than just the surface. You do your DV classes and that's it. We're recognizing that's not enough. People will just check the boxes and move on. And so we have to do more to give tools to our local counties and social services and so that's where a lot of our resources and energy have been going over the last 2 to 4 years, is more support in that arena, and not just, putting someone in jail, having them released, and they're the same or worse condition than before.
Thank you for that. My next question is to Deputy Consul Sumiti. Sumiti, how does the Indian government help its abandoned, deserted Indian brides in the United States? And does the Indian government help monetarily, help procure legal help and other ways to take care of its citizens?
Yes, actually, the consulate's job is to act as a facilitator, because you see the case usually falls within the realm of the work of either the law enforcement, or if it moves from there to the courts. But we act as facilitators. So if a woman in distress approaches the consulate, we counsel, we give advice, we inform them about the resources available to such women, whether it is through our NGOs or through other community members. As far as financial assistance is concerned, we do examine the case and we judge, we take a call on whether that particular case falls within the ambit of being extended financial assistance. However, this consulate has done so in a few cases, but our assistance is limited to initial legal assistance. It is not does not encompass the full legal battle, but we do extend financial support as well in deserving cases.
Thank you for that. That's good to know. So people would just simply call. Is there a helpline that they call at the council, or do they?
There are various ways. There is a helpline. We also have an email. They can go on Twitter. Then the Ministry of External Affairs has also set up an online grievance redressal portal called Madad. So there are various ways in which they can, appeal to us for assistance.
Thank you for that. Thank you. Officer John Harnett, do you plan to have a special team of women officers who are able to elicit and help these women find resources, shelters when they're abandoned or deserted?
Well, that's a great question. Essentially, we've trained all of our officers in the importance of responding to domestic violence calls. And a lot of our training is focused on, the emotional intelligence piece of that, and making sure that all of our officers are showing empathy for the survivors and also providing them guidance in terms of essentially anything that we can do to help them get through their particular situation. It's also important that we stress to our officers how important these calls are because of the, I would call it the compassion fatigue. A lot of times what happens is officers go to the same calls, the same families, and rather than treating the calls and just kind of, without any compassion, making sure that they really understand how important it is and provide that survivor the resources they need. And especially now during the pandemic, it's so important that we are constantly training our employees about, the changes in availability of resources, because that's all changed now due to the pandemic, making sure that they understand precautions going to emergency rooms and, treating victim injuries and changes to the court process. So essentially, to circle back, I think it's important that we as a department have every employee understands how important domestic violence is. So we wouldn't have one specific unit, directly related to those types of calls.
I'm curious to know, have you noticed an increase in calls at the Fremont Police Department since the corona and the shelter in place has kicked in?
We haven't seen an increase of calls, which doesn't mean they're not increasing.
Right.
I was doing some reading the other day, and what I've learned is that a lot of calls just aren't being reported because of the pandemic and victims not being able to have access
right.
to reach out. So there may be an increase in the hotline calls, but in terms of the statistics that we have, we're not going to any more domestic violence calls. But again, that's not to say kind of the effect that the pandemic is having on these victims in their homes.
Yes, absolutely. Jenna, how does SAVE work with the police department to help victims of domestic violence, especially when you're dealing with language and cultural barriers?
So we're stationed in 5 of the local police departments. So I'm specifically in Fremont and Union City, and then my counterpart is in Newark, San Leandro, and Hayward. We do have access to the Alameda County language line. So that's how we get about 300 plus languages 24/7.
Mm-hmm.
And we also, within our empowerment center, we have a purple VRI device. So that way anyone who is hard of hearing or deaf can have accessibility with that as well. I specifically, with Fremont, I'm on call 24/7. So in addition to our hotline, our COPS program will respond to the service of the officers to the scene, to the hospitals, to a safe location, and will provide the full scope of safe services at that time, regardless of the hour.
Thank you for that. Thank you. Rini, how does, first of all, thank you for Disha Darshan. I think that's a great cause. Thank you so much. How does cultural upbringing and language problems add to the instances of domestic violence, in your opinion?
Thank you for asking me that, Renu. But before I say that, I definitely would like to address a very important issue that I think we haven't discussed, and I would like to discuss with this August panel. Is most of the girls, okay, I'm their voice today, and they're texting me while you guys are speaking, and they want an answer. And many of them are asking, is married in India and divorced in USA. Now that by itself means a lot. That one sentence that they're writing to me, they have no idea what status they hold. So I will go into that a little bit, and then I'll talk about cultural barriers. When we talk about, we are all talking right now in English. There are many more women out there who are sitting in their homes. They speak Punjabi, Gujarati, Marathi, Tamil, you name it, and they are not able to understand what we are saying. They can only see our faces and try and gather what Rini is trying to say, and maybe they can ask me. But other than that, they don't know, and they don't know the resources or where they should be going. And we really need to be helping them. And there are definitely also cultural differences. There are problems as far as when the women are asking for refuge or they're asking for a shelter, they're 75 or 77 on the list. We do not have any place for them. So they need to go back to the perpetrator. And every woman who dares to move out, when she goes back, she is harmed even more. So in the spirit of Corona, I would say, is they are even not able to tell their neighbor, or they cannot walk outside and tell someone their pain or what is going on. The only time I get to meet them is when I work through the gurdwaras and temples to give free food in some homes, is when the woman tells me I need help. She whispers to me, and then I know that there's something going on, but we don't know for sure. So these things are very important. And when I was talking about married in India and divorced in USA, I definitely want to address Ash. I would like to address the district attorney and of course Sumati ji. This is very, very important because a lot of them have been married in India, and then their husbands come here and either get an ex parte divorce without the woman knowing that she's got a divorce. So she is now in a quagmire. She is married in India and she has been divorced in the United States, and all her money and dowry and system. So she has two parallel cases, one case going on in India against domestic violence and stuff like that. And the Indian government is working on it. And before the Indian government knows about it, this man has come here, got an ex parte divorce, got scot-free, without giving her any money, anything, and she's divorced. Now she cannot even come because she doesn't have an immigration status to come here, because many of them use the USCIS and the court systems to make sure that she never comes here because her paperwork is totally denied, and so she cannot come here to fight her cases. Very few girls like Jasmeet, and I can get you a few more, who had the daring. They came on a tourist visa, though they were officially married to American men, but they came on a tourist visa and are still fighting their cases. They do not get any food stamps, they don't get any housing, they don't get nothing. They had to rely on people like us, and more than anything else, they don't have a status. They have no status whatsoever. So for such women, my heart goes out, and that's why I decided to call this August panel. I hope Ash would consider a legislation, because there is no MOU between India and USA. There's no mutual treaty. And like you know very well, the women's rights issues are now human rights issues.
Yeah.
And so just to help get them justice, I hope our August panel would address this. Thank you.
I'm happy to, I mean, to one of your points that you made, which is absolutely correct. There are people listening in that may not, English may not be their first language, but I'll tell you this, even for folks that grew up here that speak English is fine and understand American culture, navigating the legal system is incredibly challenging and difficult even for them. So imagine compounding that when you're in a new culture, or if you don't speak English as well. I mean, it is nearly impossible. So I'm horrified every time I hear about what some of these men do. I don't know how they, I guess they don't have a heart to do that. Over the years, I've been as supportive as I can to my 3 and other organizations, Next Door Solutions, but I think that you're unveiling something that needs to be done. And right now, at the federal level, the support isn't necessarily there as much as it could be. I do believe that if there's a change in federal administration come January, there's an opportunity for us to do a lot more in supporting women that are abandoned. But what I will do, and I'll commit to you, and we can follow up after this, let's find a way. If there are any of these women, and I'm not sure if it's the case or not, they may be eligible for some state support and resources. If they're not, let's close that loop and make sure that women that are in limbo have access to state resources at least, so that they are not in poverty, they're not homeless, they're not begging just to survive while they're pending litigation or pending the outcome of their immigration case or pending the outcome of the family court case. And let's also make sure we can facilitate legal counsel for them when the man has the resources to get a lawyer and all that. Obviously, there's an unfair advantage of that. So I'm happy to delve deeper into this and to work with our Women's Caucus and some of my colleagues in the legislature. If there are ways that we can bridge the gap and get resources to these women to give them at least a chance to fight their case to stay in this country while they have resources, so they're not homeless, so they have resources so they can support themselves and their children in some cases that are also abandoned. I'm happy to work with you on that.
Can I add to that?
Thank you for that. Yes.
So one of we're the Family Justice Center, the primary center is up in Oakland. But oftentimes women who are from other countries don't, because of their culture, for a lot of reasons, their fear, they won't go into a local shelter or a local service provider. They don't want anybody in that community to see them going in. And so we have a lot of victims who come up to Oakland. There's a couple of things that we're able to do. One is that we have one of our grants, we have a lot of grants, but one of the grants, we have a partnership with immigration law firms. We work with International Rescue Center. We work with a lot of different organizations that provide the legal services for immigrant persons who are victims of crime. The other thing, the other opportunity that we have is that if we are able to file, working with law enforcement, but we're able to file an application for a victim to be able to stay in this country legally. And it's not easy working with ICE or with the immigration services, but we do this all the time. Fremont Police does it, we do it. And what we do is that we're able to certify about the victim is a victim of domestic violence. Once they have a letter, either a police report or a letter from a mental health specialist that they're a victim of domestic violence, we then, through the victim witness program in my office, we have the ability to relocate them, to provide them resources, to get them into counseling. So we have a lot of resources available, but the most important one is our ability to file on behalf of the victim for application for a visa, for a U visa, which is really specific to victims of violent crime. And the U visa, sometimes now it takes 4 years, but at least once the visa is sent and certified, and even if it hasn't been ruled on yet, it's now about 4 years that people are able to stay here. And then we can link them into social services, and we can link them into other victim service money so that they will be able to live safely. And you know, the big challenge is that oftentimes the husband is not okay with somebody who's gone and is now going through immigration. It's not okay that people in the community now know that he's a batterer. And so we do a lot to help relocate people to a safe place so that they can then be able to live and not fear that they're going to be going to the grocery store and you run into the abuser who's now even more mad at you because you're taking this to an immigration level.
Thank you for that. And for those who've just tuned in, you're listening to Voices being brought to you by Radio Zindagi, and we have a great panelist today that are addressing the questions of domestic violence, and that was District Attorney of Alameda County, Nancy O'Malley, addressing that. And actually, my next question is back to you, again, District Attorney. The question is, Alameda County reports 0 incidences of death and injury from domestic violence, sexual assault, and exploitation, human trafficking, child abuse, stalking, whatever. How has this been achieved?
Well, it's actually, I wish it was true that we were reporting 0 incidents, but we actually, I can't say that. I will say that the calls for help to local law enforcement has not changed in as many years as I've been paying attention to it. It hovers somewhere around 6,500, 6,800 calls for help. And even during COVID, we did a lot of outreach. We did Facebook Live. We put resource information in the food bank bags. We put them in the grocery stores so that people knew that there were services out there, because I think a lot of people thought, well, everything's closed down, so there's nothing there for me. But that wasn't true. So what we do, we have now 20 years ago, we had 27 deaths in 1 year as a result of domestic violence. And so myself and Hillary Larkin, who's a physician assistant from Highland Hospital, we got together and we created the Domestic Violence Death Review Team. So we look at every death go to the coroner's office at the end of the year. We look at all of the reports of people who died. We identified those that are domestic violence. Some of them have not come to us through the police department, but we look at all of them, and it can be male, female, it can be same sex, it can be father and child. I mean, it's domestic violence and family violence. So we've gone from 27 deaths because we have a community outreach group, and we've put a lot of attention with all of our partners, SAVE and Building Futures with Women and Children and Tri-Valley Haven. We have 5 shelters in Alameda County alone that are very effective and have been around for a long time. So with that strong partnership, we have changed the way we all engage with domestic violence. We have reduced domestic homicides from 27 at a high to 2 years ago, we only reported 3. Now that's 3 too many, but it was 3 from 27. And then this year, we are at the end of the last Friday of every October, we have a day of remembrance. And we remember and we honor all of the people who were killed as a result of domestic violence. We have over 200 people, and we've been doing this now for 20 years. We have over 200 people that we honor that have been killed. Babies, older people, mid-aged people, women and men who have been killed as a result of domestic violence. So we strive every year. We go back, we look, did we miss something? Should we strengthen our protective orders? Should we have more police involvement? Should we have stronger advocacy? We look at everything to see what could we do to finally, once and for all, eliminate domestic homicides.
Thank you for that. And we've just been joined by Assemblyman Kansen Chu. Kansen, are you there? I think he's just gone. Oh, here he is. He comes back. Welcome to our show. Welcome to Voices. This is Assembly Member Kansen Chu, who was elected in November 2014 to represent the California's 25th Assembly District. So welcome to our show, Kansen. I'm Renu, the host.
Thank you very much for having me. Thank you very much. Always enjoy to listen to Nancy O'Malley, our district attorney. She is definitely the expert and the leader in fighting for the cause. So thank you very much. It's really nice seeing you.
Thank you so much. And I'm going to, since you just joined us, I'm going to pose the next question to you. What are your thoughts on domestic violence, and what are you doing about it in counties under your office?
Right, it's just like DA O'Malley was saying that during this pandemic, people are sheltered at home, and a lot of those domestic violence actually happens in this home, in a supposed to be a safe place. So we did see an increase of the domestic violence call. However, my biggest concern is that this domestic violence is still very, very underreported, because a lot of time when the students or the children during the school will kind of share those information to their teachers, and that the teachers can get the social worker to work on those cases. But with the schools closing, so our biggest concern is that the domestic violence is not underreported. Last year, I did sponsor the bill. Let me see if I have the number. Oh, it's AB 800, which will allow the survivors to have identifying information redacted in the court document, including name, phone number, online username, and more. So this is really follow up with a state program called Safe at Home, which allow the survivors or the victims enroll in and use an alternate address in public documents submitted to the state, county, and the government agency. So the AB 800 was signed in law by the governor, and I think this is another level of protecting the victims and the survivors of the domestic violence.
That's wonderful. Thank you. That really is. Kudos to you. Thank you so much.
Nice to see you.
Deputy Consul Sumiti, my next question is for you. Do you have any special new schemes for the protection or prevention of domestic violence?
Well, in the consulate, as such, we don't have any scheme for protection or prevention. But like I mentioned, we do extend assistance in terms of connecting the women in need with the resources that they require for their help and assistance during such times.
Thank you so much. Ash, my next question is for you. What are your thoughts about how the state of California intends to curb these atrocities across the board for what women are going through, especially the silent sufferers?
It's hard, obviously. I mean, you all know that, having done work in the arena, it's hard to reach the silent sufferers. I will tell you a couple of things. One is economic independence. We already spoke a little bit about that, but that's so critically important. And that is something that California, we're trying to uplift, especially the working poor, those that are undocumented, to have access to resources that otherwise they wouldn't. Because we know that, particularly with women that are being abused, that it is that financial link that keeps them from leaving a relationship so often. And so that's absolutely recognized by the state. It's something that we're going to continue to work on to create that sense of independence, so that the reason why a victim doesn't stay in a relationship, that money is not a factor in that. Now, can we eliminate that altogether? Probably not. That's always going to be some factor, but that's where we have to coordinate with organizations like SAVE and with the counties, just to make sure that the support network is there, so that you don't feel like you're jumping off a cliff when you're leaving an abusive relationship. Instead, you're jumping into a group of people's arms, and that they can carry you until you can walk by yourself again. That's kind of, and so that there's no one silver bullet to that. There's a series of things that we have to do in terms of criminal justice reform and creating support for the victims, and as I mentioned earlier, for the perpetrators to get to make sure that they don't re-abuse again. There's a lot we have to do in economic reform in terms of making sure all our jobs have dignity and that those workers, regardless whether they're documented or not, have the support systems to stand on their own 2 feet. And there's a lot we have to do in children's and youth education in our schools. Oftentimes, children seem resilient, but they're absorbing a lot of really nasty stuff. And we have to really identify the youth that are carrying so much with them. And I think especially in the South Asian community, especially in the Indian community, I think that we learn growing up being Indian that, you don't get involved with someone else's business, although everybody will talk about it, they won't get involved in it, right? Oh, that's their family's business. Everybody will whisper around the house, but they won't actually knock on the door to see what they can do to help what's going on in the house. We've got to be better. We've got to be better, and we have to call out the men in our community that are not being part of the solution. They're silent on this. It doesn't, even if they're not, abusive, what have you, but they're being silent, and silence is unacceptable. The men have to call other men out. They have to speak about this publicly, even when it's uncomfortable, even in social settings. That will give the space to the women to feel like they're being supported.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Officer John, the next question is to you. Actually, I have 2 questions. So one of the questions is coming from the audience, and she's written that women victims are generally not given a female officer, and many Indian women feel very uncomfortable to discuss their abuse with a male officer. Do you have any recourse of that in the Fremont department? I mean, is there anything we can do?
Yeah, I mean, I sympathize with that. I think for us, making sure that our workforce represents the city is something that our recruiting efforts have been doing for a long time. So making sure that we have that in the forefront of when we're recruiting for police officers. Unfortunately, we don't have the luxury of having a female officer on scene at any type of domestic violence case. I mean, we're fortunate to have really high performing, outstanding female officers at our department. However, just based on staffing shortages, we just don't have the ability to have those officers specifically tasked for those calls.
Thank you. And then the other question was, does the Fremont Police have a special cell to help victims of domestic violence, especially when they are, again, language barriers? Is there anything else?
Yeah, very similar to what Jenna had talked about, the language line, and making sure that all of our officers are up to date on the resources that we have for that. Absolutely.
Thank you for that. Thank you so much. We're getting so many questions from everyone. So my next question is for you, Jenna. What are the resources that SAVE can provide to help domestic violence victims and survivors?
So for survivors, we have our 24-hour crisis line. So that's 7 days a week at all times, where advocates are trained to take these crisis calls and provide the proper services as a uniform movement. As far as our office currently is, because of COVID, we're open. All of our services are being done full-fledged, but our office is by appointment to see our case manager, just to keep the rotation of clients kind of as minimal to interactions as possible. Within our COPS program, we're still providing the temporary restraining order services where we'll help clients fill those out. We are still providing long-term case management. There's still a court accompaniment. It is being done via Blue Jeans at this time, for the civil court, at least that I know of. And we're still able to provide that emotional support for clients. To kind of touch back on what the captain was speaking of, if clients are having this fear of a male officer, we also do help with the reporting. So if at that time they decide they can't speak, they don't want to speak because of a fear, I'm for Fremont and Union City, Newark, San Leandro, and Hayward, we're able to sit with the survivors and help make those reports on the following day. If that's something that they need support with, we're able to do that. We cannot speak on their behalf because we're not legal, but we can definitely provide that support if it's a female presence that they are requesting, and to help kind of that barrier and provide help with those translation services.
Thank you for that. There's a very interesting question that I would actually like to ask that's coming from our listeners, and if anyone can answer that, that would be great. Is it possible to involve the US Embassy in India? So if someone is stranded in India, she can go to go to that particular point, the US Embassy or someone there, to ask for help to locate the husband or the missing husband here? Who could answer that question for me? Could it be the district attorney or anyone could answer that? Rini, did you put your hand up?
Okay. I would like to answer that question, and hopefully I would like to hear from the others. It's very important that not only our Indian consulate and the United States consulate, we need to work together in a symbiotic relationship, because if that woman has been stranded in India and the man has come back to the United States, there has to be a way that she can come here so she can fight her case. So there have been times when we have really handled that and actually talked and really got through the red tape, so to say. I think Sumiti ji will be able to best answer that. And sometimes what happens is when a lot of men get involved in some cases here in the United States, they run away to India, and there is nothing, because the jurisdictions of both the countries are not working. So the men sometimes, I'm sorry to say, really know how to use the system really well, and they move from one country to the other trying to get away, because they are well prevalent with the laws and they have the lawyers and the power and the money. So what happens is we should be able to have, that's why I think today we are having this August gathering, is if we can have some memorandums of understanding between the United States and the Indian governments, because Sumita ji in the past has helped in some cases where she has even helped in making sure that their passports have been revoked of such perpetrators. But you know what, to a limit, is because they have lawyers here in the United States and they have lawyers in India who try to circumvent the system. So till the two governments are not one, until they don't decide that, okay, this is what they're going to do, A versus B, and I'll let the other people answer because I am not the one in power, they are, and they can help move the system faster than me. I can only voice the opinion. So if they would really like to talk about that, that would really solve a lot of our problems. Thank you, Renu.
Yes, I would just like to say that, the two governments do hold regular consular consultations where a lot of these kind of issues are discussed. So there is a mechanism and these discussions do take place. However, I would just like to tell Rini ji that I don't think lawyers circumvent the system. There is a certain law and there is a certain due process. So if someone has got a certain, reprieve from the court, I don't look at it as circumvention of the law. It's something that has been given through due process of law. So yes, the consulate can revoke and impound passports, but that is only if the court gives that direction. You see, several courts in India have now ruled that, limiting someone's mobility is not a decision that can be taken just administratively. And the consulate is not in a position to take a judgment on a decision on who is right and who is wrong. So it's only after the court takes a judgment in a certain case and gives certain orders that we can execute it.
Thank you for that. And I believe District Attorney had something to say on that, right? Sorry, you were muted. You good?
Both covered it, yes.
Oh, both covered it. Okay, great. We're getting so many questions, so sorry if I'm kind of looking back and forth. I have the chat window and I have my screen over here on my phone. This is really, I can tell you a lot of people are tuned in and hundreds of questions are coming in. So my next question is back to you, Assemblyman Kansen Chu. Could you tell us what is the Safe at Home program, please?
Okay, yeah, the Safe at Home program is a state program that allows the victims and to use a different address, a different name, and when they register with what was the organization? I think it's the what department? Ash, do you know what department or Nancy, help me out, when they register with the Secretary of the State, I believe.
Yeah,
that's right.
They can use a different. Thank you, Secretary of the State. They can use a different name and a different address, so the perpetrator will not be able to find them and invoke more harm to.
Yep.
Anything?
Breaking up, yes.
Anything to add, EA Monali?
No, you covered it.
Okay, thanks. I have a question. The listener has actually posted this twice, so I think they really want me to ask this question. So I'm definitely going to go to it. The question is, what about men who are suffering domestic violence? when a wife comes from India and gets her legal status in the United States, and after that threatens the man that she will put false allegations so she can get out of the marriage and get good child support alimony, what should a man do in that situation? This has been put in twice in the box, so I have to ask it.
I'll start first. Anyone who's a victim of domestic violence has the right to all of the protections, and that oftentimes will start with a police report, though it's not required. It can be going to speak with someone like a mental health professional who can write a letter to say this individual has been a victim of abuse. And it doesn't have to be physical abuse.
Mm-hmm.
It can be mental abuse also.
Right.
And that's, part of what we see a lot of. We see it like at the Family Justice Center, we see about 1,000 men a year. And so we have again, it's the same thing that if there's first of all, when the police do the investigation, when we get ready to take a case to court, we're looking very deeply to see whether or not if there's a false allegation or something like that. But also, I think that the important thing is to speak up to someone. It can be confidential. It can be done confidentially to a mental health provider or somebody like that, to speak up so that there can be an intervention that doesn't have to be in the courtroom. It doesn't have to be in that very public way. But there are resources that are available, and there are men who are victims of domestic violence who do finally find the courage to come forward and be able to receive services at least.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Ash, there is a question for you. What are your thoughts about how the state of California intends to curb these atrocities across the board for what women are going through? Oh, I think Ash is offline for 2 minutes. All right, no worries. I'll move on to, I think the next question is going to be actually for, I think I already asked that one. There's so many coming in. Deputy Consul Sumiti, there are women legally married to NRI husbands. Can you help and abandoned in India? Can they get visas or entrance into this country illegally? And can your department help?
Well, visa to come into the US would be a decision that the US government would have to take, and it's their sovereign right to accept or deny a visa application. So there's really nothing much that the consulate can do as far as exercise of a sovereign right of another country is concerned.
So there's nothing you can do to expedite it or move it faster or put in a quicker request. So sometimes the waiting period is so long.
You see, it's like this. You see, we would have to rely on what the lady is saying. Okay, we have no way to judge whether what she's saying is right or wrong, right? So, like I said, that is a decision that the US Embassy or the consulate in India would have to take.
Thank you for that. Next question is for Jenna. Jenna, as a crisis response manager, what are your challenges when working with South Asian domestic violence victims?
Oh, yeah. The easy answer, I guess, is finding that common ground. There is a lot of secrecy in the community. So a lot of the time I will reach out to one of my community organizations like Nadika or Maitri, because sometimes it's just easier for that survivor to speak with someone in their own language, from their own country. And it's just a comfortability thing. I'm not everyone's cup of tea. Not everyone's going to open up to me. So it's just a matter of bridging those gaps and making sure that the survivor is the most comfortable. And if it takes not me working on it, I will bite that bullet and give it to another organization to make sure that the survivor gets the proper services and the max amount of comfortability, because it's an uncomfortable situation to start out with, to divulge your dark secrets to a stranger. As much as I'm here to help them, it's still not the most comfortable. So we want to make sure that they have the proper service and support that they need.
Thank you so much. We're almost nearing the end of our show. So what I'd like to do at this particular point is come to everyone's closing statement on this particular topic. If you could share something from your heart, what you feel, how change could be done, what change we can do. So I will begin with District Attorney Nancy O'Malley. If you could go ahead and give us your closing statement on this topic.
Thank you. First of all, thank you so much for having this show and the focus with the experts that you've brought together. I think it's critically important for the community to know that domestic violence affects all of us. It absolutely impacts the victim of the domestic violence, and it can take all forms. It could be psychological, it can be economic, it can be physical, it can be isolation. There are a lot of ways that domestic violence happens, but there are also a lot of people out here to help, that people that care very much about the safety and the well-being of any victim. And as was said earlier by Assembly Member Kalra, that what we also know is that children in the home who witness domestic violence have deep trauma. And what we're doing at the Family Justice Center is we're really focusing on the hopelessness of people that feel like there is nothing other than this moment. This is how their life will always be. So a lot of the work we do is to help people find hope again, particularly children. And that there are wonderful organizations in Alameda County and in Santa Clara County in the Bay Area who can be confidential, they can be protective, there are resources that are available. Please don't suffer in silence. We are all here, in spite of COVID, we are all here to help and to make sure that people are safe and they have the resources they need. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And thank you for also addressing that. A lot of people think domestic violence is just physical violence, and they don't realize the emotional and the mental abuse can sometimes be even worse. We are giving our closing statements, Ash, and I had a question for you, and I think you would have to take a call. And my question to you was, let me bring it up. What are your thoughts about how the state of California intends to curb these kind of atrocities across the board? And then if you could also give your closing statement as well.
Yeah, I think that it has to be a partnership, with our counties, with our cities, the local level, and we oftentimes the state can create programs or bring that identify an issue, but ultimately what it really means is that we give resources down to the local government. But it starts with us recognizing, where, like, for example, Rini had brought up an issue that now I can dive deeper into. That's why these conversations are so important. It's because at the state level, we don't necessarily see everything happening on the ground on a day-to-day basis. So what the state can do is really amplify the voice of the advocates at the ground level and the elected officials and others at the ground level. And then we can follow through to give more support to what's working. Because the state's too large of an entity to just start doing something. We have to model what's working in smaller arenas. It could be a county, it could be a city, it could be one particular nonprofit that's doing something that's working. And so those are the kinds of things that we can do. And so I just want to thank you for inviting me. These are the kinds of conversations we need to have more of. These are the kinds of conversations we were not having in our community many years ago that we need to absolutely have more of in order to combat what is prevalent, in our community, in every community in our society. And so thank you so much for engaging us in this really, really important topic and conversation, Renu.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Captain John Harnett.
Well, thank you so much. I've just been honored and humbled to be part of the conversation. Thank you for shining a spotlight on such an important issue. And I want to recognize Jenna, the amazing work that she does with SAVE and collaboration with the Fremont Police Department, Union City Police Department. So just thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Deputy Consul Sumiti.
Yes, well, I would like to point out 2 or 3 things. One is to all the women out there. Before you get married, make sure that you have done a thorough background check. Ask the uncomfortable questions. I think a lot of us, don't do that. And if something is too good to be true, then it probably is. After you are married, make sure you don't hand over all your power to your spouse. Have control over your bank accounts, over your assets, so that if at all you find yourself in an unfortunate situation, that you have control over your own resources. I've had cases where women have come to me saying that they don't have access to their own bank account. So please don't do that. Third, educate yourself. And by education, I don't just mean formal education. I mean, educate yourself about the resources available to you, you know, where you live, who are the people who you can reach out to, you know, organizations like SAVE or Maitri, Narika, you know, make sure that you know who you can turn to for help. Fourth is step out of your shell, talk to people, you know, tell people what's happening so that, you know, they're there, that they're aware, because a lot of the times I think even the neighbors will say, I didn't know that, you know, something was happening. And I think fifth is purely as a woman and not as a consul. I think a lot of women have to finally get out of the victim mentality, that I'm a victim, and, you know, take the power back and look at ways how you can move forward. Finally, thank you for having me and giving me the opportunity to speak in this August gathering. Thank you so much.
You know, thank you so much for everything that you said. It really related to what I did. And believe it or not, 30 years ago, I based my marriage on Bollywood movies. Thank you so much, because had I also done some homework, I had no idea, coming from Kenya in England, that there was something as separate and community property. And everything you said has resonated with me. And I really hope all the young women out there, especially South Asian women, have listened to what you've said about doing their homework and that background check. You know, it's so critical. Thank you so much. Jenna, first of all, thank you for all the work that you do. I know a lot of organizations do work, but thank you so much. And I'd like to hear your closing statement.
Yeah. I just want to say that we at SAVE don't have a timestamp on our services. So if nothing recent has happened, you're still completely available to receive our services. And that the idea to what can you do to end domestic violence can really seem like such a large task. So I always take it as kind of like a bit by bit, just support businesses that support you to go out and vote. I'm a huge coffee drinker, so I changed from a big corporate business to supporting a local business that's Black owned, female owned, someone that supports the movement that I also want to make. So it's doing one by myself may seem small, but if you have a whole community that can move with you, that can make the biggest of difference. So just make sure you connect with organizations, people, resources that support you if you feel like you're overwhelmed or if you need something to look up to.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Assemblyman Kansen Chu.
Hey, oh, thank you so much, Renu, for having me here, and thank you for all you do, you know, throughout the years. It's really an honor to be part of this very distinguished panel on this very important issue. I just wanted to share with you that in Santa Clara County, the district attorney's office also have a family violence division, and their number is 408-792-2969. I think that the biggest takeaway today, and for all the listeners and the audiences here, I want to thank you very much for your questions, and I wanted to assure you that all the victims and the survivors, you are not alone. There's a lot of people out there to assist you, and we please do report. And also, like Ash said, you know, when you notice something among your friends in the different families or in different setting, please call for help. Thank you very much for having me here.
Thank you so much. And last but not least, my friend Rini, who actually encouraged us to start this whole conversation many weeks ago by bringing on an advocate and a victim for this situation, and also helped us put this together. And of course, thank you to Radio Zindagi, Sapa, and Neeraj and Ira. So Rini, your closing statements.
Okay, my closing statement is I heard all of you great people, and I just wanted to say a few things. Number one is when Nancy did mention is that it's not only about breaking marriages. Sometimes people want to live with their loved ones, and sometimes they're showing a reaction to something which may be deeply embedded. It could be a mental problem, or it could be needing to see a psychologist, psychiatrist, whatever. They don't intend to do what they are doing. So I really appreciate that about Nancy doing that. But we need to talk about deterrence. I think our major purpose was, after today's second step that we had, is what are we going to do about it? So number one is definitely, if we can have some deterrence, we can, I don't know if that's the right word, we can put the scare in the men that they cannot do what they're doing and continue to doing it. And when it has quadrupled right now in the corona situation, so we can just let them know that there are all these great people who are keeping an eye out. And if they do that stuff, then they are either going to be removed from the country or will face serious charges. So I just want them to know. So if they are planning the next meeting or the next domestic violence thing, so they've curtailed in their steps by all these great things. I would like to talk to the two assemblymen. I really want to congratulate Kansen assemblyman for doing what he did. That was very important and a need of the hour. We definitely needed to redact people's information because they were being found and were being intimidated by their perpetrators. And I loved what Ash said, and I think he's going to have a complete dialogue. And yes, in the Indian community, this is for the very first time, instead of shoving everything underneath the carpet, we are talking about issues which are very, very important. And of course, I would like to talk about, I know Deputy Counsel, I know they have their limitations because obviously their jurisdictions are different from country to country, but they do their very best because they do shield in and take in a lot of calls and then send it to all of us so that we can help those people. But I definitely like to say is that, yes, you're very right. We don't want to call them victims. We want to call them empowered women, or as Renu said, call them advocates. I think that was the word that Renu coined. And obviously, Officer John Hammett, definitely, I give kudos to you and Jenna, because when we were, I was talking to the chief of police, and I realized in Fremont, we were having fewer cases because what you both do together to curtail domestic violence, that's very important. But our journey is far from over. There are so many burning issues, and I can see so many women asking so many questions. So I don't think we can finish this today. But last but not the least, I always tell every woman that one woman with courage is a majority, and they have nothing to worry about if they will just reach out to people and talk about what is going on with them. We have all these people wanting to help them help themselves. With that, thank you, Renu. Over to you.
Thank you so much. And, I had a couple of people ask me during the week, why are you doing the show? I think you're over exaggerating the situation. So I got some data for you guys who sent me those messages. According to data collected by the United Nations, published on May the 13th, 2020, 243 million women and girls between the ages of 15 and 49 worldwide were subjected to sexual and physical violence by an intimate partner in the last 12 months. So if you don't think that's data, what else do you need? Amongst all the horrors of COVID-19, domestic violence is growing, and it's important for us to remember that even now, as prisons have become hotbeds for the spread of COVID-19, some criminal justice authorities are halting arrest, releasing inmates. These numbers are only going to increase. So unless all of us join hands together to actually start to do something, we will continue with what I call, this is worse than the COVID-19. So on that note, we raise our voice, not so that we can shout, but that those without a voice can be heard. Thank you so much, everyone. Again, for me, it was a true honor to even be on this panel with all of you. And again, thank you, Radio Zindagi, Seba, especially, who's been burning night oils to show me what I had to do for this show. And thank you, Neeraj. Thank you, Ira. And thank you, all of you, every single one of you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.